Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Puck Watching STL, offseason edition number 5. First time that Nick and I are together in the same room for a podcast besides at the Blues games themselves. Feels good to be here. We're on a little vacation right now. It's great to be in Southern California, enjoying our time and celebrating the 4th. Hope you all are doing the same. But in the last 3 days since free agency has started, as well as the NHL draft before that, there has been a lot to talk about for the St. Louis Blues, Nick. So we're going to get into a lot of topics, but first, we're going to get into Justin Carbonneau, 19th overall pick for the St. Louis Blues, Nick. And we didn't really expect it. We thought that the Blues were going to try and go for a right-handed defenseman of some sort, try and beef up that defensive core that in the pipeline that they really have been lacking, besides Adam Jarachek drafted last year. So they're beefing it up, though, with a winger, Justin Carbonneau. How are we feeling about him?
Yeah, I think most people were a bit confused on the pick at first, and then we saw some tape. And once we saw some tape on Justin Carbonneau, I think all those worries were put to rest. We saw him at development camp right after he was drafted. Guy looks like a stud already, but a bit premature. We don't know exactly how these things play out. He's probably could still go to college. He can go to a development league of some sort as well. But Armstrong did mention that he has an opportunity to find a roster spot come regular season time for the Blues. I assume you'd probably see maybe some preseason action as well. So I feel like everyone feels pretty good about that pick. And I've watched some highlights myself, and he looks like a player.
Yeah, he does. And so he had a great season in the QMJHL last season out of Blainville. I don't know how to even pronounce the French name and the team that he was playing for. However, 46 goals, 43 assists for 89 points in the QMJHL through 62 games last season. So he finished number 2 in the whole league in points and scoring. So that is a sign.
Guess who he models his game after?
Who?
Jordan Kyrou.
Oh, man.
Jordan Kyrou, right winger. St. Louis Blue Jordan Kyrou, not traded Jordan Kyrou. Maybe a Blue for a very long time. I know that was a source of contention. I know a lot of people had some strong feelings on whether Jordan Kyrou should be traded or not. Obviously, that didn't come to fruition, but it's good to see that Kyrou's getting some love, though. I think that felt good for him, probably.
No, it definitely did. I was a little bit suspect as well. I know that we talked about the potentials of getting Noah Dobson here in St. Louis, but now he is officially gone with the Montreal Canadiens, and we'll get into Logan Mailloux in a second. But it was definitely a good thing, I think, at the end of the day. Not, I think, trading Jordan Kyrou for that amount of value that seemed like Noah Dobson kind of brought with him, as the Montreal kind of had to pay an arm and a leg for it. But I think it's right to have him as the future for the moment right now. But the winger core seems to be pretty solidified at this point, because as free agency has now unfolded, and again, we can talk more about Carbonneau and his potential impact a little later, but we've had a lot more signings, and we were anticipating some different, I think a different free agency for the Blues. I think a little bit more active than in the past couple seasons, especially now with some Blues cap situations. Again, Crew's going to be on the LTIR soon, so that's going to be another $6.5–7 million in cap space. So that's good. So they could have definitely capitalized on that. You lose Ryan Suter, you lose Radek Faksa. That was a little bit of a surprise for us. We thought that maybe he would sign with us again, but didn't turn out that way. He's back in Dallas. But now you have a guy, Nick Bjugstad, with the St. Louis Blues. And Bjugstad, a very veteran center that can add a lot to the St. Louis team, and signing a great 2-year deal, very cheap, 1.75 for Bjugstad. So how are you feeling about him?
I think that was a sight for sore eyes. I think the talks with Faksa soured a bit. Armstrong hinted that he understands when players want to make deals and when they don't. And it did not seem like Faksa was relatively that interested in coming back to St. Louis. That is what it is. I think Bjugstad is a great replacement for Faksa. He is 6'5", 205 pounds. He hits like no other and can fit on that fourth line perfectly. I think with Torpin and Walker also supplementing the physicality there. He's got 1,657 hits throughout his tenure. He's kind of a journeyman. He's been on a lot of different teams since he was drafted, but he's a good two-way player, very physical, like I said. He's got a sneaky, quick wrister, not always the most accurate, but effective, and can kind of shoot up lines as well. He doesn't have to stay on that fourth line. He can be effective. He scored 22 goals 2 seasons ago. So if you can get, 15 to 20 goals out of Bukestad this year, I would consider that a massive win and something that not a lot of fourth liners could really achieve. So I would consider that a great win, especially for the money that we're paying him.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't be shocked to see if things go by the wayside for Schenn this year. Maybe he even picks up some third line minutes at center, because he definitely has that potential, I think, as a player for him. And I think some people on the Blues Twitter were saying he may be playing second line center, which that's not going to happen because Blues a couple days later signed Pius Suter. And we are missing one trade that happened on the day. So we're going to talk about that in a second with Mayu. But we wanted to say about Pius Suter. There's Alex Joya on our feed. Hey,
Yeah.
Alex. Pius Suter, signing him again for pretty cheap, about 4.125, I think, was the final total for Pius Suter. And again, a pretty short-term contract, right? I think you're right now still trending towards the young with Dvorsky, kind of paving his way to be in the team in the future. But for now, this is kind of the transitional years still for the Blues. So how are we feeling about Pius Suter, who is going to probably fill your second line center role with the 25 goals last season?
I think there will probably be a battle. I think they'll test Schenn out with that second line, just given how well they played with he played with Kyrou and Holloway last season. So I think they'll probably have it out a bit during camp and during the preseason. But I think when we were looking back on it last week, we're like, what are the Blues going to do about the center spot? Foxa doesn't seem like he's going to be in this year. We have to make the signings. You sign Bukestad, and you're like, okay, you're still missing that second line, third line depth. We don't want to put Oscar Sundqvist back on that third line or fourth line for that matter. And all of a sudden you have Robert Thomas, Bukestad, Suter, Schenn, and then you throw in Sundqvist as well on this as a center. So I don't know what you do with Sonny at that point, since you do have a little bit more depth than you had previously. But again, great problems to have.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this Suter signings was critical. And again, for the money that we got him, we got a 2x4. I mean, that's an ideal situation for the Blues to find themselves in, especially with Dvorsky still working his way up to be NHL ready. So a very good situation for them. And with these signings, I think they did exactly what they needed to do to solidify that center spot for all four lines.
Yeah, I agree. It was a huge problem coming into it. I never really realized just how big of an issue it was. Like, you had Sundqvist centering your third line pretty much all of last year, which, it got us to the playoffs, but it's going to be really hard to go anywhere past that and position yourself to be in an even better spot for the playoffs, because we had to play the President's Trophy winners this season. So it was really tough with that. But now you get somebody, whoever it may be, whether it's Schenn or Suter or even Bukestad at times, like whatever kind of finds their pedigree within that line, I think is going to be so crucial. And I personally think that that's the spot where Sundqvist is right now, which finds him probably being healthy scratch at the end game one come, in October. I think it's probably his time to be a healthy scratch and then just fill in when injuries sort of pile up at times.
I would imagine. I thought Sonny had a pretty good playoffs. I think he's a good vet player, but with those signings, I'm not exactly sure how he's going to fit. I'm sure things will work itself out and the Blues will figure out where he fits or where he doesn't. But I do think we glossed over a bit, just to move over to Mayu.
Yeah.
Zach Bolduc, no longer a St. Louis Blue, losing a 19 goal scorer from last year, 17 assists. Good two-way player, good shot, great on the power play, especially late in the year last year. Now a Montreal Canadian. That one was difficult, I think, to process at first, especially when you're getting a guy in Logan Mayu that does not have a bunch of NHL experience. Mm-hmm. Had a bit of a checkered past a few years ago. I think that has passed from what I've heard. And I think people are very bullish on his career and his trajectory in the NHL. I think one of the things that I've heard him be compared to is Evan Bouchard. If he is anything like Evan Bouchard, I think the Blues are going to be A-okay on the defensive end. There are murmurs. I know, Alex, I see you in the YouTube comments saying Bowen Byram for Jake Neighbors, straight up, who says no. I don't know if the Blues can afford to lose another winger for someone like Bowen Byram, but I don't think that's ruled out of the discussion at all. I think the Blues are still searching for another defenseman, especially as they do age a little bit. You still have Parayko, you still have Fowler, you still have Justin Falk. Nick Leddy, no longer a St. Louis Blue either, just recently waived and picked up by the San Jose Sharks. So that cap hit of $4 million is now gone from the books, which is huge. So there's a lot of things to still figure out, I think, in free agency. It literally just started 2 days ago. So it's not as if things are done yet. There could be moves made for someone like Bowen Byram, but I don't see that happening right now unless things would work out. I don't think the Blues want to get rid of Jake Neighbors, but I think they may make some type of exception. Just depends on the deal that they would get for the Sabres defenseman, but time will tell on that.
Well, a lot to break down there. First, you're right. I think San Jose who picked up Leddy was doing God's work. I mean, I think that's the best we can say, because we did not want him to be in this organization any longer. And I don't think that he would ever, not that he ever listened to this podcast before, but if he ever tuned in, he would probably never tune in again, because we have been vocal Leddy / Falk haters pretty much the whole time we've had this podcast. But I can tell you, fun career for Nick Leddy being here. I think he came in at a crucial time. Remember, he came in 2022 when we needed that left-handed defenseman, and we got it. And he was still pretty good at the time with the Red Wings, not a bad guy. And I thought he played some power play time as well that year with all the injuries that we had. But then he really kind of did well with that defensive core. Again, he kind of was with Falk sometimes, and then was with Parayko a little bit. So he kind of traded with that. But overall, I think it's a pretty solid career or solid time with the Blues for Nick Leddy, because obviously he's definitely not going to be done in San Jose, who also made some corresponding moves defensively as well with Dmitry Orlov. So San Jose is kind of a different story. But I am looking forward to seeing kind of who's going to be stepping up here with the Blues defensively, because I know that it's not going to be the story I don't think is over yet, because yes, the whole Bowen Byram rumors they're definitely happening, and they're definitely pushing for it. I know Rutherford posted something about it the other day, a couple hours ago, I think, that they're still pushing, but he's an offer sheet, so it'd have to come with a pick or something like that. But I just don't know really how you would justify it unless you somehow manage to maybe just get rid of Falk in the process, because right now your defensive pairings, again, correct me if I'm wrong, you have Fowler and Parayko as your defensive pairing 1, and then you have Broberg, Falk 2, and then Mayu and Tucker, and then maybe supplementing Kessel in there whenever, because Suter's gone, now Leddy gone. So is there really a need for another defenseman in there if you can't dispel any of the other ones, the most likely being Falk in the process?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting next couple of weeks to see if they're willing to kind of sell a little bit more on the winger side, because the Blues are pretty loaded on the winger side, like we were just saying. I don't know if it's going to be worth getting rid of Jake Neighbors, who has now scored 20 goals in back-to-back seasons, and he's 24 years old. So still a young, promising career and an excellent third line winger. I don't know if we are able to make that call yet. I was a bit surprised that they were still that interested in pursuing Bowen Byram or just another defenseman in general. I know how badly they want the top 4 defensemen to be locked up for a long time. But I think the Blues still have other things to worry about outside of that, because you still have to re-sign Broberg. You still have to make sure that Dylan Holloway is re-signed. They're going to want a lot of money. So the cap is going to rise. It makes you feel a little bit better that Krug will be LTIR'd, Leddy's off the books. That's great. I still think, unfortunately, there are a lot of other things that need to move before we can necessarily solidify another defenseman. defenseman, but I trust that Armstrong and Steen will be able to figure that out. I think they've had a heck of an offseason so far, and I would love for them to keep, making things happen as long as it makes sense.
Yeah, hard to justify, at least at this point, I think, getting rid of another winger because, you already lost basically a 20-goal scorer with one and who had a lot of upside with him, probably can definitely do more. And I'll love to see what he does in Montreal. Thankfully, he's not on our side of the conference. So I don't want to really deal with that guy that much. I think he's got a lot ahead of him. Bolduc talking about.
Yep.
But, it's again, and then you say Neighbors, he's another 20-goal, 25-goal scorer. For that matter. And that's a really valuable asset to have on a team. So to get rid of somebody like that, along with another young guy, would be really tough in order to just continue to beef up your defense. I think it's pretty beefed up right now. I think it's in the best position it's been in and probably since 2020.
The defense, that is.
Yeah, the defense.
I think that'd be crazy to say otherwise.
Yeah.
They're a bit younger, obviously with the acquisition of Mayu, and I don't know. I don't know how willing they are to get younger. I know they want to get younger. I know it was a problem. It was a huge issue the last couple of years with Letty, but you still have the elephant in the room in Justin Falk, who still has a few more years left on his contract. He's still, can skate. He still has, clearly something left in the tank. It's just a matter of, I think, talent and what the Blues are going to be willing to put up with him, given he has underperformed the last couple of years. So all of that to say, it's still going to be an issue if he's still on the roster. I just don't see a scenario where the Sabres would be interested in getting someone like Falk. But again, I don't know. I know they want NHL players. They don't just want prospects. They have to put a team on the ice. They've already lost so many people already. So I think it'll be really interesting to see, but I do think the defense is solidified much more than it was even last year. Yeah. So it's a great scenario to be in still.
No, it's a great problem to have. But again, there's a lot more to be figured out because, yes, we're happy that the Blues are in a good cap situation right now. We said 6-7 million, potentially. I don't know the exact metric. But then you have to figure out what's going to go on next season. You may have some cap to play with this season, but you look at the future, you got to lock up some dudes. You got to lock up, as you said, with Holloway and Broberg, but those are the two main guys. But they're going to be demanding some good money. Odds are with Holloway, it's 8 or north of that, and Broberg similar, maybe a little bit south of that. That's still considerable amounts of money to dedicate towards two guys. They're going to be RFAs, but still, it's a little dangerous to think about that with the future of the Blues. But I think it's a good problem to have. I really do.
We got another question.
Yeah.
From Hockey G91 Films. What are we doing with Joseph and Texier both making at least $2 million and not cracking the starting lineup? I saw a lineup projection from Blues Views that Joseph would start on that right wing on the third line. And he had Shen and Neighbors slotted in there as well. I think that makes sense. I think one of them will have to play this year on that third line. One of them is going to be not there.
Yeah.
One of them is going to be a consistent extra. I wouldn't be surprised to see a consistent swapping out like we kind of saw this past year.
They're a great problem to have.
Yeah, scratching Joseph, scratching Texier. Just depends on what you want from your lineup that night. Joseph and Texier are very different players. Texier is still really young too. So I don't know. I think, again, like what you said, it's not a bad problem to have. You just don't want people just eating up cap space, not playing. Yep. Of course, that's not a good problem to have. But at the same time, I don't think that's the worst thing, all things considered right now. But we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised to see a move. I really would not be surprised to see a move for Army to try to see what he could get in exchange for someone like Texier or Bolduc, Texier or Joseph or both of them, and see what they could get back for both of them.
Yeah.
But we'll see. They're signed up for another year, so I wouldn't be surprised to see if they wanted to make a move and try to alleviate some cap space or just get someone better.
Yeah, I'm with that. I agree with that. I wanted to go back to my U real quick. Because I feel like we kind of glossed over him a little bit too much. But again, this is a 6'3", 212 defenseman, and this is the beefy guys that you really need. Like there was really I don't think there was any defensemen in this draft that were drafted that were not below 6 feet. Like that's kind of the future of it. Like again, it's all about having speed and all of that now in the league, but it's also like you got to be big and still possess a lot of power and stride with your game. And obviously, Mayu has really encompassed that. But again, talk about his controversial history, but comes from the London Knights of the OHL, which is if you guys don't know about it, it's one of the most storied franchises in the Ontario Hockey League. And with them, he played three seasons with them, impressive numbers. But his most notable one was 77 points in 59 games with them, 25 goals, 28 assists. I think that's the OHL for you. Different metric. It's obviously junior hockey, but think of the alumni that's come out of there. And again, maybe this is just signs. I like talking about this stuff. John Tavares, Mitch Marner, Bo Horvat, Patrick Kane, Matthew Tkachuk, Corey Perry, Pat Maroon, right? So I'm not saying it's a sign that it's going to turn out like a player like, John Tavares, but there's really no notable defenseman on my list. But that's a really good, sign of they saw something in him in the junior hockey league and potentially can maybe get something out of it. And obviously played in the AHL last year for Montreal, mostly played 8 games the last 2 seasons with Montreal and has 5 points in 8 games with that. So pretty impressive. But with the Rockets, for the AHL affiliate, 14 goals, 33 assists, 47 points in his first season with them. And then a little bit of a down year, but played 10 less games, 33 points, 12 goals in that span for him. So, but really his scouting report says, and almost kind of reminds me of Parayko-esque with the scouting report, says he is a killer shot. And I'm just, I'm reading off of this. They call it a cannon. And this is just the words from habseyesontheprize.com. And this is a Canadian source, but also can turn it into a snapshot. And then people are so afraid of him shooting the puck that sometimes they're ready to block the shot, but then he dishes it off for a good play and a potential scoring opportunity. So that reminds me a little bit of some Colton Parayko stuff that I feel like we haven't seen, because he's that guy that can just absolutely kill the puck.
Yeah. And
he's really the only defenseman in the Blues that can really do that. Mm-hmm. So I like that.
I agree. Even he cracked the NHL lineup 7 games last year, played for the Canadians, got into the playoffs as well. He registered, I think, 5 points in 7 games, had a couple goals, a couple of assists as well. Yeah. And he was a -5, I think, net. It's just too small of a sample size to really even make any conclusions of that anyway. Yeah. But still a good sign that he is producing at that level anyway in that short sample size. So I think that's a very positive sign for us. And of course, he's going to be a work in progress, but Armstrong's said in his press conference that it's his job to lose. Mm. So I fully expect him to be inserted to the lineup, whether that be the third pairing or second pairing. I think that's a TBD there. Yeah. But I'm very excited to see what this guy can do. And I'm sure Armstrong was just licking his chops, thinking about someone like that becoming available, even if it meant trading Bolduc, which he said pained him a lot. And it pained a lot of Blues fans, by the way, too, just given what the ups and downs with Bolduc, I think, and then with him really coming into his own this past year. But I do trust that they saw what this guy can do, and I'm really excited to watch him play next year.
It's a gamble, and that's kind of how it works. I think Armstrong has been on the better end of the gambles, I think, recently. But when you look at we'll give you pros and the cons with that. The pros, you look at an example like last year with the offer sheets, and you say, that was awesome, but that was a gamble. Who would have thought that Holloway would have been that type of player this year? Nobody would have thought that. Broberg a little bit more, but he went into his own element this year too. Gamble that didn't work out. Pietrangelo versus Torrey Krug didn't work out the way it did. He thought it could, and it just didn't happen. Obviously, a lot more to do there, but also wishing Alex Pietrangelo the best after probably going to miss the whole season next year. So I'm actually kind of glad we don't have to deal with that force, because that would have been a tough one to lose. He's like 34, 35, but still a very good defenseman. And then one more thing about Mayu, about this with the gamble, is that his weakness that they're saying was his positioning kind of defensively, what I heard. But he managed to do it a little bit better with the Rockets this season, but sometimes gets a little panicky with the puck. And I'm thinking of Justin Falk as just don't be like that guy. Be a little less panicky than him. Like you're still a young guy. You have the sort of the excuse to still yourself learn the league and all that. But let's try and stay away from him. Those two on a pair together, I think, with that in mind.
Yeah, it's going to take some time for him to find himself on the ice, especially on the NHL level. You saw it, I guess, with the Canadians early with the -5, and you don't know how those goals really. I haven't watched all those highlights to see if they were his fault or not. But I think that with our coaching staff, he's going to be able to develop just fine. Seems like he's really excited to be a Blue and see a bunch of ice time, which is exactly what Holloway and Broberg got. And look at them now. So I think it's a really good spot for him to be in, just like it was for Broberg and Holloway. So I think the sky is the limit for a guy like him who's super young. He only has a year left on his contract, so they're going to have to figure that one out too. This year's going to be critical for what they want to do with him moving forward, but I would assume they're not going to let him walk for nothing. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think it's a net very exciting move. But of course, losing Bolduc is a big deal, so this does need to work out a bit for it to have made sense.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot. There's going to be a lot in the next 2 months, I think, when it comes to prospect camp. And again, Doug Armstrong said that, he has a chance to, show up to training camp and really prove himself to see what he can do. Not to say he's going to be in the league next year, but they're certainly going to give him a shot to see what he can do at training camp and see how he can really fit in with the elements of the NHL. Also wanted to mention that along with Carbonneau, Blues had a 5th and a 6th round pick. Not going to really mess with these two Swedish and Russian names, but it seems like that they had another forward that they drafted along with a goalie that was drafted in the 6th round. Herrenstrom, I can probably pronounce that. But again, 5th and 6th round players, tough. But we should mention, these guys may be lower on the totem pole when it comes to the NHL draft. Pius Suter, fun fact, undrafted. Started playing in 2015 and cracked the league finally, I think, 2019 with Chicago. So you don't really have to be drafted to really get your shot at the league. Because Pius Suter, looking now, he's getting paid $4.125 playing for the Blues.
Yeah, I mean, he just grinded, made his way to the top, and had a great year in Vancouver last year. And now he's a Blue and is going to see a lot of ice time as well, and maybe slot into that second or third line and hopefully be able to produce just like he did last year. What he scored 23 goals
25.
last year, 25 goals last year. So you get a 25 goal scorer. Oh my gosh. I mean, that's the most ideal situation you can find yourself in with the second line or third line center. So excited for him, excited for Bukestad. I think Shen could have, a decent year as long as, he doesn't have any pressure to really produce a lot, especially if he's, you have Kyrou and Holloway to the right and left of him. But if he drops that third line, I think that'll be a little bit more interesting, but we'll see. I think the Blues have a lot to figure out with their lineup and where they would like to position everyone, but good problem to have. Not bad at all to see who's going to win out and play on that second line is great, because the first and second lines are going to be, I think, pretty elite when it's all said and done.
Yeah, we didn't really have this podcast last year, but I can tell you we didn't really have this issue last year with the team. We were trying to figure out where Broberg and Holloway would play, but nowhere did we think that they were going to be second pairing and second line guys for our team, but they have proved wonders. And obviously Suter, fun with one thing about him, Vancouver was a pretty good team last year. They just missed the playoffs below the Blues and below the Flames. Ultimately got by the Blues. He was tied for second on the team in goals, 25. With him, he tied Brock Besser, who I think just got paid $7.5 million on an extension from Vancouver. So 7.5 or 4.125. I'll take that any day.
Absolutely. No, the contracts they were able to get with these signings are really, really. I mean, I don't know how Armstrong was able to get these guys for this value, but it's huge for their cap space, and they're in a really, really a much better spot, if you will, compared to where they were literally a week ago.
Yeah.
So that's a huge net win for the front office there for the Blues.
So I guess our question here is this a letter A grade for the Blues free agency and also the NHL draft this year? Would you give it an A?
I would give it a B+,
Okay.
and I would love to give it an A, but there's too much unknown with the Bolduc trade to understand exactly what that will entail for the future.
Yeah, it's tough. Like, I think I'm on the same level with you, but if that trade was, didn't happen, and like, I feel like we'd be still in pretty similar territory with it, because there's still somebody to be excited about with Mayu, but there's also something to be disappointed over, with losing Bolduc. So I think we're kind of in similar issues, but like, we don't have the beefed up defense if it wasn't for, trading Bolduc, but and the younger guy who can potentially be, who knows, a very good defenseman. It sounds like an offensive defenseman as well. So it could pay a lot of dividends, but could also go south. We just don't know, but it's the gamble, and it's management. And Doug Armstrong has succeeded at that level for a long time. And this is his last season as the GM for the Blues. And I'm sure Steen had a lot to do with this as well. So I'm sure he's probably really loving what he's done as well to contribute to this team.
Walking into a good situation.
Yeah, very good situation. So I guess finally here, talking about, closing a little bit with, are the Blues going to really be doing anything else to this, or is this kind of a wrap on Blues free agency only 3 days in?
I think it's mostly a wrap, besides the thing they were talking about earlier in the podcast with Bo and Byron.
Yeah.
I think that that will eventually play itself out. I know we're probably in the top 3 teams that are in the running for him. I don't know what the Sabres really want with him. I know they probably want I don't know if they want to resign him and then look to trade him after, or they're looking for an offer sheet or something like that. I don't really know what they're thinking in their heads there, but I know the Blues are interested. Wouldn't be surprised to see something there. I would just prefer probably not to get rid of a Neighbors in a 1-for-1 type situation. But if they did get rid of Neighbors, I don't think that's the end of the world, but I wouldn't prefer it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I understand.
That's the only one that I can see, though. I don't see anything else really happening.
And they wouldn't, it's not like they would really want Justin Falk in a trade, like if they do that, they want to pick on top of that, but how many picks do they want, with that? Like, kind of hard to gauge with that. But if I'm Doug Armstrong, I would definitely be open to letting him go as well with that. But again, you also have acknowledged, we're always critical about him, but he's had a 50-point season with the Blues before, and he's had signs of good play over the course of his time with the Blues. I'm not completely counting him out, but it should be in consideration, because he's the guy out of all your defensive core that you could part ways with.
And he's wearing the A.
He's wearing the A.
So I think that makes it a little bit tougher as well. I'm sure he's got a lot of respect in the locker room. Trading a guy away like that may have an impact there. But you get rid of Krug just due to unfortunate circumstances, and not saying that in a flaunting way or trying to mock that. Of course, that's a bad injury that Krug had to do, but you do end up freeing that cap space at the end of the day with an LTIR situation. You manage to get San Jose to claim Leddy off of waivers, and all of a sudden, bang, you're so much younger already by getting rid of Krug and Leddy's contracts, and you have more cap space. So couldn't have worked out better. The Krug one was a fluke, but the Leddy situation was the most ideal situation that could have happened. I thought for sure it was going to be a Saad situation where hopefully there's a mutual departure, and we don't have to eat that contract like we would have probably had to if Saad just said, hey, I'm out anyway. It's all good. So I don't really think Leddy would have done that. So I'm very grateful for San Jose. Thank you, San Jose, for that. That's beautiful. But I really think this is a young, rejuvenated D-core now. Not that we're the youngest in the league by any stretch, but we're getting there. And things are trending certainly in the right direction. And I can't believe the front office, again, was able to do what they were able to do this last week or so. It's been fireworks. It's been kind of a mixture of, oh my gosh, why'd you do that? Oh, that's awesome type thing. So very excited for it. I want the season to start tomorrow.
Me too.
I want to see all these fellas on the ice.
Yeah.
We're very far away from that. I think the schedule gets released in like a week or two. And we'll kind of go through that a little bit once that's released, because that's always an exciting time. But I'm excited. There's no doubt about it. I think that window is certainly opening up. And if it wasn't open already, I think it's wide open right now, and I think it's only going to become more wide open as you get a Dvorsky that's slowly coming into his own, and Snuggerud hopefully being able to produce at the level that he was able to do last year. I mean, all those things go well. Blues should be in a really good spot.
I'm with you. Yeah. And I guess one other thing with, across the free agency, and we were speculating in the last podcast, Florida's going to be able to sign everybody. That's what I said. Just wanted to say that for the record. And it did happen. Ekblad, Marchand, and Bennett all re-signed. And they signed for much cheaper than probably any other team would have paid for them, despite all their ages, despite Marchand's age especially. I bet he would have probably gotten 8 to 8.5 if he would have tested the market. But here he is back with the Panthers, and that's the one team, maybe the Blues. If Sam's right, they're going to be a top 5 team in the league next year, then the Panthers just may be in their way for everything. But also, I would say there's a lot of teams that have improved though. But got to give credit, I think, to the Blues for, I think, a really good free agency. And I'm with you on the B+, but I think there's really, in our opinion, it sounds like that there's really not much more to come with this. There could be something with Byram. Then there's a lot more to talk about then. But this, I would not be shocked if right now, when we sit here July 3rd, that this is the team that we walk into October with, purely squared away, ready to go and fight, maybe to chase another cup.
Nope. I would expect the lineup to be exactly the same. But the beauty of it is if the Blues are in a really good spot and they want to add another piece, they have the ability to do so at the deadline.
They definitely do.
What a great circumstance to find themselves in. So, yeah, I think the Blues are in a really good spot, and I want hockey to start tomorrow.
Yeah, me too. But unfortunately, it's July. But this kind of concludes it. It's our vacation. We didn't want to, I know for you all, probably going to be celebrating the 4th soon. Independence Day, going to be fun. But enjoy your holiday celebrations. I know we will. But we just wanted to get this out here, I know, just to inform everybody about all of our thoughts relating to a bunch of Blues moves. But we're super psyched about them, I can tell you. And we're super psyched that we finally got to do this in the same room together instead of just being screen to screen. Yeah. So really appreciate you joining on. Looks like we had a fun little
big crowd
audience
today
here, but I'm very excited. But anyway, enjoy the 4th of July for all of you, and we'll be back soon.
Thanks, guys.